The Chancellor was left in tears at Prime Minister's questions after a nightmare few days. Number 10 says it was a personal matter. The PM is backing her. But how will the party's MPs tackle this crying shame? And rapper Sean Combs, known as Diddy, has been found guilty on 2 counts, not guilty on 3 others in his sex crimes trial. We'll get the verdict of a lawyer representing some of the women in the case. Hello from Newsnight, home of top insights and guests, live from Broadcasting House. And that's the view of the House of Commons, where today the Chancellor of the Exchequer was in tears amid government chaos. Rachel Reeves had a tear in her eye and on her cheek as the Prime Minister missed his first moment to back her in the Commons after that welfare climb down. Hello. Our guests, welcome, are Arlene Foster, the Baroness, who as First Minister of Northern Ireland was under pressure within her own party, the DUP. Hello, Dame Arlene.
Thank you.
And former Minister, long-term Labour MP, Barry Gardiner, long-term friend of Newsnight as well. But first, Nick Watt, on a fork-in-the-road day for the government. I mean, has a Chancellor ever wept at the dispatch box? Or
no. I mean, I do have to say, Paddy, it was a very strange atmosphere in Parliament, because what happened today was that the personal met the political. So the personal, as you say, we had a visibly upset Chancellor. We're told that she'd had a difficult conversation with the Speaker shortly before Prime Minister's questions, when he sort of took issue with the way that she handles questions from MPs during Treasury questions. Treasury number 10 saying, look, this is a personal matter. And then the political was the Prime Minister appeared to equivocate in his support for the Chancellors at Prime Minister's questions. I was speaking to one of the Prime Minister's aides and they said the Prime Minister simply didn't know that the Chancellor was upset. You might say, well, that's a bit strange, she was sitting next to you. But when you're the Prime Minister, you're looking right across the chamber. So he didn't know. And then it was after that session that there was clarity that absolutely he was standing by her. Now, all this blew up because the government has been absolutely shattered by the level and the strength and the depth of the U-turn they had to be, basically gutting a flagship bill to get it through the House of Commons. Lots of sort of huddled, difficult conversations amongst MPs today. But on the personal, I did have some pretty serious conversations with friends of Rachel Reeves, sort of almost like heart-to-heart conversations. They are really upset. They're really worried for her because they really admire her. But one of them, I mean, they said this to me: I don't see how Rachel can come back from this. It just looked awful.
Arlene, it looked awful. Our youngest female viewers tonight, welcome to Britain, where female politicians weep.
Well, you know, we don't know the full story behind this, and I've heard different versions of, yes, she's had an argument with the Speaker, and we observed yesterday in Treasury questions that he was trying to get her to keep her answers shorter, and she was quite dismissive of that. I don't know whether you've seen the VT of that, Nick, but she was quite, you know, oh, for goodness sake. But actually, he has obviously called her in today and said, look, you need to answer a question shortly. But I cannot believe that someone of Rachel Reeves' long-standing in politics would cry at that. I think there's something else. And I think maybe it's something much more serious than just an altercation with the Speaker.
Barry, you were there. Take us into the moment. Did you see it unfold?
Look, can I just say, this is what I hate about politics and the media, right? You pile the pressure on a politician. As Nick says, it's been a horrendous week for the government. Rachel has been the person who everybody said it's her fault, it's her fault. You pile the pressure on somebody, and then when actually they respond in a human way, what do? You then focus on that and blow it all up.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of blame to go around, because I heard it was WhatsApp group from Labour MPs who were piling not just pressure, but invective. So it's all very well pointing the finger of suspicion at us.
No.
It's your own party.
Look, we have had robust, conversations about this bill because the government handled it dreadfully. Nick knows, I don't think we've ever had a bill where the government on the floor of the House has filleted it in such a way that you actually have to change the title of the bill because it no longer has PIP in it.
Let's not go around everything at once.
But Barry, just to say, you're absolutely right to pick up the media, but sterling and the markets moved before we had uttered a word.
And also
I accept that.
And also, let me tell you that the Prime Minister's responded tonight again, and he did not blame the media. Here he is talking to Nick Robinson for the Political Thinking podcast. Let's just have a look at it first. You can respond. Here's what he had to say.
She's made it clear it's a personal matter. And I'm not going to go into the personal matter of a colleague. What I will say is that she's done an excellent job as Chancellor. We have delivered inward investment to this country in record numbers. She's done a fantastic job. She and I work together, we think together, and in the past there have been examples, I won't give any specific, of chancellors and prime ministers who weren't sort of in lockstep. We're in lockstep.
People assumed it was because of politics, that she decided to quit, or you'd said to her, Rachel, I'm sorry.
Look, firstly, Nick, is
that wrong?
It's wrong. I can just tell you that. That's absolutely wrong. Got nothing to do with politics, nothing to do with what's happened this week. It was a personal matter for her. I'm not going to intrude on her privacy by talking to you.
Arlene, is she going to be sacked?
No, I mean, I think that's a very interesting piece there from Nick Robinson, because the Prime Minister has said he is in lockstep with the Chancellor. I think that's very significant, actually, because he's not distancing himself. In the chamber today, he didn't take the opportunity to back her, which I think a lot of people seized upon. But if he had looked at the Chancellor, never mind crying, she looked absolutely dreadful. And you have to say to yourself, what is going on? There's something happening that we're not aware of. And he's talking about the personal. I am not going to jump to conclusions as to what is in the background, but there's something going on.
Barry, it seems that there's difficult party management. And you've explained that there's a lot of blame to go around. And I think a lot of viewers will think there is to the media. But it's not clear how they're managing the party, is it?
No, look, I think there's a real issue that has been exposed by the debacle that happened yesterday. And that issue goes back to the fact that we have a large majority in terms of the seats, but it's very thin. And so if you adopt a command and control style of government and you think, well, we've got a big majority, whatever we do, we can get it through, you then don't listen to your backbenchers. You don't listen to your own side. And if you don't do that, you then lose their confidence. And the issue that then comes into play is they get worried about their own seats because they've now got thin majorities. And they start saying, actually, I need to push back against this.
So let me mention Rachel Reeves. A few minutes ago, I said that I was quoting a friend of hers who said that they don't see how she can come back from this. Well, it turns out that Harriet Harman, Baroness Harman, the former deputy leader of the Labour Party, is watching Newsnight. She has texted me to say Rachel Reeves can and will come back from this. Harriet Harman, a hugely significant figure in the Labour Party.
And also a sister. She's known as a sister, isn't she? And speaking up for the women in Parliament. But Kemi Badenoch, she really has gone the other way, didn't she? She said she was looking miserable. There's no female support from the Leader of the Opposition for the first female Chancellor. Do you think it makes her look a bit mean?
Well, let me say this. I actually watched that back because I wanted to see what had actually happened. And up until... So Rachel Reeves is pointed over at Kemi Badenoch and remonstrating with her, and as a result Kemi Badenoch says, well, she looks miserable, doesn't she? So there was a bit of banter going on at that particular point in time, and actually Rachel Reeves wasn't crying at that point in time. So I'm
Arlene, I was watching it live, and my sense of it when she did that, and actually I was standing on the Tory side of the Speaker's chair, behind the Speaker's chair, next to some Tories, and they thought, wow, that was sharp. Look, the point is, and it's not just about her being a woman and women's support. This is about being kind to people and recognising that we're all in a job where there are huge pressures, there's huge stress that we go under, and if we can't actually respect each other, disagree on the substance, on the politics, on the policy, yes, but don't actually turn it into a personal vendetta. And that, I thought, was what was the bullying bit that Kemi Badenoch did today.
Well, I don't think it was bullying, responding. But I think she was responding to the fact that Rachel Reeves was pointing at her, to be fair. And I mean, she was responding to that and the fact that physically she looked pretty poor today, and there's no getting away from that. There's probably a very good reason for that, and we don't know what that reason is, and it hasn't been disclosed to any of us. But I think this is an important point because there is something going on within Labour around their leadership at the moment. Barry talks about a disconnect. Barry talks about the fact that you have a huge majority, but yet we're in a situation where we have had to fill out their own bill. I think that's incredibly significant.
We'll ask you to pick up on policy because I know we've done a lot of the personal in just a moment. We want to listen to a senior cabinet minister. He's told Newsnight that the Chancellor's tearful performance showed humanity and that the Prime Minister does not owe her an apology. I've been speaking to the Paymaster General, Minister for the Cabinet Office, Nick Thomas-Symonds.
The Chancellor is the Chancellor of the Exchequer, but she's also a human being. But let's just be crystal clear about the Chancellor. She has done an excellent job. She is doing an excellent job. She will continue to do an excellent job. And number 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister have previously said she will be in post until the next general election. 10 Downing Street has said that again this afternoon. So let's be crystal clear about that. The Chancellor is going absolutely nowhere and she will continue to do an excellent job for the country.
The moment when the tear fell was when her friend, your friend, the Prime Minister, was on his feet. He didn't back her as fully as he could have done. Do we say to our youngest female viewers that this is normal?
There's nothing normal about Prime Minister's questions. You know,
the Chancellor in tears.
She's a human being like anybody else.
It's not normal.
By anybody else. Well, I'd hesitate to, when people show their humanity, I think that's a perfectly acceptable thing to do. But let me just deal with Prime Minister's questions because it is a bear pit. I've been in many Prime Minister's questions over the last 10 years as a Member of Parliament. Prime Ministers sometimes engage with what the Leader of the Opposition says, sometimes they don't. That's just the nature of Prime Minister's questions. But what is absolutely critical here today is there is no doubt the Chancellor of the Exchequer, her job going to be in post until the next general election. That's what number 10 Downing Street has said clearly this afternoon.
Do you think she's been treated differently because she's a woman?
To be fair, I haven't been following
well, you could answer
all
if
the
you think she's been
coverage
treated differently as a woman.
Afternoon. Rachel herself.
Rachel from accounts.
Rachel herself has spoken very powerfully about the barriers that she has faced to become the first female Chancellor of the Exchequer. But I am very proud that she has smashed that glass ceiling. Okay. But today is not about, we can talk about the coverage this afternoon. What I know is we have a Chancellor of the Exchequer who is been working this afternoon in Downing Street. We move forward now as a team. She will continue, I know, to do an excellent job for the country. And we will continue to take forward an agenda that is foundational to that is economic stability. That is the bedrock upon which all our policies are based.
Because it doesn't look like a team when one of the top players cries. That's the point. It doesn't look like a team. So if it is a team, there needs to be some bridge building. Would you give our viewers that much? There's been punishing hours this afternoon. The team needs to go into the locker room.
Well, I'm not going to insult the intelligence of your viewers by saying this hasn't been anything other than a challenging week. But I do take issue with this idea that just because a member of a team shows a bit of humanity, that's a problem in the way that your question might suggest. However, I do accept that when we have moved towards welfare reform, and by the way, nobody disputes that we inherited a broken system, but I do accept that we did move too quickly, but we have listened and we move forward now as a team.
Do you think it removes half of the wiggle room? We thought the Chancellor had 10 billion. We think this is going to lose you 5 billion. So it's said that there can be no move at all on ending the two-child benefit cap. Would you as Paymaster General agree with that maths?
We are currently looking with our task force at what are the different ways in which we can tackle child poverty. But in terms of the broader financial picture, first of all, economic stability will always be central to what this government does. But in terms of decisions, wider decisions, that's obviously for the budget in the autumn. We are a few months away from that.
How long have you been a friend of the Prime Minister? I believe you're a good friend of his.
Yeah, I've been friends with the Prime Minister for many years. But by the way,
20?
Probably not quite as many as that. But
you can see that he's got some flaws, isn't he? he admitted that he was distracted by foreign events, so he got the strangers speech wrong. He's apologised for other mistakes he's made. Do you think that needs to rebalance and focus on domestic issues more?
No, because I mean, there's two points here. First of all, the challenges that we faced domestically need a Prime Minister respected on the international stage to make a difference. Take the issue of the small boats in the English Channel. We will only solve that through international cooperation with people going across thousands of miles. And the idea, by the way, that was put by the Leader of the Opposition last week, that somehow going to a NATO summit critical to the world's security and indeed to the G7, somehow our Prime Minister should not be represented at the country at those events. It should be a Prime Minister's question is absolute nonsense and shows she is not a serious politician. But to the broader point about Keir, and yes, I have known Keir for many years, but I think that candour, that openness that he's shown is a strength of leadership.
So
it really is.
Would it be a strong thing to do to apologise to Rachel Reeves today for the bruising encounter that she suffered?
No, because what happened to Prime Minister's questions... No, because the
What
Prime Minister...
you do as a friend? You say, go on, just say sorry. She was comforted by her own sister when she left.
Look, but this is the bear pit of Prime Minister's questions. Now, I think if you look at the exchanges between Prime Ministers and leaders of the opposition, as I've said, sometimes they engage directly, sometimes they don't. That is just the nature of Prime Minister's questions. The Prime Minister and 10 Downing Street have set out the position with regard to Rachel, that she will be there until the next general election.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Picking up on that, Barry, is there a sense in which voters may see a human side? I think that's what we're hearing there. It's human. Could it play to Rachel Reeves' strengths?
Well, look, in one sense, it has. I think people do understand that we are all human and that we sometimes show that and the sort of professional mask, if you like, slips. But more than that, today we've got a Prime Minister saying that the Chancellor is in post right the way through to the next election. So if anything, it has solidified her in post because it's precipitated him having to say that. But, you know, I think more broadly on what Nick was trying to get at there, you know, the balance between the international and the domestic that you challenged him on, we've had huge issues at the international level. And of course it's right that the Prime Minister should be there fighting for what we believe in as a nation. But actually, somebody at home should have been making sure that the flock at home were being listened to.
That's very candid of you, Barry. That's your classic Newsnight guestery, because you don't just come from the silo. And I wonder if I could have the same candour from you, Arlene.
Always.
Well, you think of those Brexit arguments and the fights on the right.
Yeah.
Do you remember feeling it very personally? I've got a quote from you. When, you know, if you're not going to say yes.
Well, I don't know what you're going to say.
Well, do you remember it feeling very personal on you at times?
Oh, for goodness sake, yes. And I mean, politics is personal because you stand up, particularly when you're in a leadership position, or in Rachel Reeves' case, to be the first female Chancellor.
You said it was misogynist.
Because you're always going to be challenged that everybody else before you hasn't cried. Yeah, but everybody else before you was a male. You know, I mean, this is the thing that people forget. That I mean, she has been the first female Chancellor and has made a lot about it. That's true. She has made a lot about it. But the reality is she is being judged now quite harshly, I think, because we don't know what the backstory is. We do not know what the backstory is. People are conjecturing about the Speaker. They're saying that the Prime Minister didn't back her. But why, when she came into the chamber today, did somebody lean over and ask her was she okay before any of this happened? Right. I'm very interested in all of that. OK, let's come to the policy. I keep saying we're going to come to the policy, so let's listen to it in her own words. The Institute for Fiscal Studies now says tax rises in the autumn look increasingly likely. It would be hard to square rises with the Chancellor's oft-repeated position on taxes and her fiscal rules. If you have not been paying attention, here's a reminder.
We've made a commitment not to increase income tax, national insurance or VAT.
We made that commitment not to increase taxes on working people.
This is a big budget. It wipes the slate clean.
I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. This budget, we did wipe the slate clean.
I said that our fiscal rules were non-negotiable, and I meant it. I will always deliver economic stability, and I will always put working people first.
I've made that commitment that we won't increase those key taxes that working people pay, income tax, their national insurance and VAT as well.
Arlene, will someone, whether it's her or another Chancellor, have to raise taxes?
Well, it's very interesting, isn't it, that the New Statesman, their front page this week is just raised taxes. So the pressure is beginning to grow, I think, from within Labour to raise taxes. And regardless of what has been said by the Chancellor in the past, I think it's very likely that now that's what we're facing into.
But I mean, what's interesting, those fiscal rules. I mean, Tim Lernick had a really interesting piece on Politics Home today. He said after the spending review, after those U-turns, the markets didn't move. They moved today. Yeah. Why did they move today? Because there was a question mark over the Chancellor. In other words, the markets have confidence in her because they believe her when she says those fiscal rules are ironclad.
And Barry, although the Tories left office covered in cake and catastrophe, they did nutcracker Labour. They spooked them in this manifesto to say, oh, we'll never raise taxes in the three main ways that every government since they were invented.
Look, my own view, and look, here we now get to policy, and there
only 20 minutes in.
I'm very happy to show my disagreements with Rachel on policy. I believe that there are some very easy ways in which she can keep her promises, not to raise those three fundamental taxes.
Give us one easy way.
Okay. It would be to make permanent the windfall tax on oil and gas development in the North Sea. At the moment, our basic rate of tax on development in the North Sea is 37%. With the windfall tax, it goes up to 74%. And that is the global average.
Okay.
We are the lowest basic tax rate, and it would achieve £14 billion a year extra for the Treasury if we were to do it.
Or would it? Because, of course, investors would pull out of the North Sea and you wouldn't get that sort of return. And that's always the challenge when you raise taxes, what happens to that? And I think it is very interesting that, you know, whatever about why she was in the state that she was in today, that when the markets think that there is an internal pressure on the Chancellor, they move. And that is what is happening now. And I think the Conservative Party have said that it's, you know, the most expensive tier ever. But it probably is because they are now losing confidence in the Chancellor. And that is the critical issue. Are they still confident that the Chancellor is going to stick to her fiscal rules?
And all three of you, starting with you, Nick, have Labour MPs overshot? The rebellion is eating itself. Have they got more of a taste for this early on than we all thought?
Well, we all know that, you know, divided parties, divided governments don't win elections. But the bottom line is the Labour Party, the Parliamentary Labour Party, flex their muscles and the Prime Minister blinks. So it's a shift of power.
You know, Nick, I'm not so sure on that because I was talking to a lot of colleagues today and all of us, as you know, I abstained eventually on the bill, although I was going to vote against until we got those last-minute concessions. Even those colleagues who did vote against and the colleagues who voted with the government, most of them were saying to me, we now have to come back together. We have to be a united party. We recognise that, the importance of that.
And a quick one from you, Arlene?
Well, I will repeat what Nick has said. Divided parties do not win elections, and the Labour Party need to remember that.
Thank you all. For decades, Sean Combs, also known as Diddy, was one of the world's most successful musicians with celebrity friends, a rap career and a business empire said to have made him a billionaire. Last September, all that came to a halt. He was arrested in New York, accused of crimes including sex trafficking, forced labour and obstruction of justice. Since then, the trials revealed a different side of Mr Combs, violent, controlling and abusive, including to his former girlfriend, Cassie Ventura. Today, the case came to a mixed conclusion. Combs shook his fists in triumph as he was found not guilty of racketeering, nor guilty of sex trafficking Ventura and another woman, but he was found guilty. These are the very stylised court sketches of transportation to engage in prostitution, a charge which carries a 10-year maximum prison sentence. US Attorney Lisa Bloom represents a number of clients who have civil cases against Mr Combs, including one who gave evidence as part of this major criminal case. Welcome to Newsnight. Can I ask you, is this a mixed reaction in what's happened by the jury?
I think that's fair to say. It's disappointing that he was not convicted of the top charges, but he is now a convicted felon of serious federal charges, so serious that the judge has now denied him bail pending the sentencing. And his own attorneys are saying that he should at least get a couple years behind bars for the charges he was convicted of.
Yes, so that's breaking news tonight. I heard that on the 10 o'clock news here in the UK. Does the denial of bail signal how the judge may feel on sentencing?
It very well might. The prostitution charges that he was convicted of, transporting people across state lines for the purposes of prostitution, require really that bail not be set pending sentencing. In addition, the judge said his violent tendencies, which there was a lot of testimony about at trial, as you just said, his violent tendencies really preclude the judge from ordering bail. So to keep everybody safe, Sean Combs remains incarcerated.
Your client, Dawn Richard, she claimed she'd seen violent abuse. How is she taking this verdict? How are or this view of the jury? How are other women in this case taking the news?
Well, everyone's quite scared, really. They're terrified of Sean Combs, not only his violent tendencies, which he himself has said are inexcusable. His own attorneys have said that he is a domestic violence perpetrator, right? So there's no question about that. And they're scared, especially people who testified against him at trial. He also remains a very wealthy and powerful person. But also, Ms. Richard and my other client remain steadfast in their desire to bring him to justice in the civil case, and we intend to do that.
Yes, so there are some civil cases going on, and to viewers, I've got a statement from Mr. Combs' lawyer that I'll bring you shortly when I get through this, this detail. Do you think that the civil cases look more likely now?
Well, they're completely different cases. So the criminal case doesn't really bear upon the civil cases. And the civil cases have a lower burden of proof. It's just preponderance of the evidence, not that very high criminal standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. So we think we can prove our civil cases. You know, there's the famous case of O.J. Simpson, who was acquitted in his criminal trial and then found guilty in the civil trial. We think the same thing's going to happen here.
OK, I mean, we always think that one jurisdiction does influence another, but you're telling me that you've got confidence no matter what had happened. And I think if we go back to your first answer, Lisa Bloom, you would think that it does appear to be a mixed picture. It's not a slam dunk, is it, from the jury?
That's correct. It's not a slam dunk either way, but it's a tough day for victims and survivors of sexual abuse. That's who I've represented for 40 years and still fight for every day. I think people wanted to see him convicted, especially given all of the violence that we know happened. But this is just one case. It's one set of facts, one set of laws, one case. It is not an indictment of the entire Me Too movement, which is about millions of people worldwide standing up against sexual abuse.
Mr. Combs was found not guilty of the most serious charges. His lawyers have said previously in relation to your client, Dawn Richard, Mr. Combs is shocked and disappointed by this lawsuit. In an attempt to rewrite history, Dawn Richard has manufactured a series of false claims, all in the hopes of trying to get a payday.
Well, she's shocked and disappointed by his behavior, which was documented over and over again by witnesses at the trial. I went to the first few weeks of the trial and watched witnesses say the same thing that Dawn Richard said, which is he is a violent, abusive person, that he threatened people, right? That's what the testimony confirmed.
OK, thank you for joining us. It's all moving tonight, our time. There's been a decision from the judge on the bail decision. Thank you for joining us, Lisa Bloom.
Thank you.
Let's look at the stories back home, and if time, we've still got our guests here, our own expert witnesses. The Daily Telegraph, pound falls after Reeves's tears. If this was a personal matter, why did she have to sit? Why did she have to sit there? You're nodding at that, Arlene. This is your suspicion.
Well, I think if she was so distressed, why did she go in knowing it was going to be a bear pit, which it always is in Prime Minister's questions, you know?
To The Guardian, tears and turmoil as PM forced to defend Reeves. Barry, that's interesting that The Guardian's going with forced to defend because he didn't take his first chance, did he?
Yes, but as Arlene is saying, when you're at the dispatch box, your focus is entirely on the questions that are being fired at you, the traps that are being set for you. You're focused on that. You're not looking down and behind you to find out what's going on there. So I don't think he understood what was actually going on beside him.
Thank you. And the Sun, do we have time to just see the Sun? I'm under so much pressure. And the Daily Mail, which is what Arlene was saying, who or what caused the tears that spark turmoil. Thank you very much to our guests this evening. Thank you for coming. And to Nick, as ever, of course. Nick and I are back tomorrow with more of this, Can You Believe? Thank you for joining. Goodbye.